RML, Montgomery, Hitler, and Patton all had a strong fixation on Napoleon. Even more than 200 years after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, modern military leaders still study his campaigns in detail. So, what made him so legendary that he continues to be studied in military minds to this very day? In this video, we'll look at 3 phenomenal tactical maneuvers by Napoleon that demonstrates why his tactical mastermind still shapes modern military strategy. There are certainly many battles I could have begun with, but I chose the Montagnier campaign as the first in the series because it was in Mont where Napoleon first proved himself as a general who should be exceptionally feared and respected. To give a brief background to the campaign, after Napoleon violently put down the Royalist uprising in Paris in 1795, he was promoted to a general in the War of the First Coalition and was now given the command of the French army in Italy. The French army in Italy numbered approximately 38,000 men, and his opponents there consisted of 2 separate armies, the Piedmont and the Austrians. The Piedmont had around 25,000 men, and the Austrian army at around 30,000. The Piedmont was located around Esse with fortifications in front of Millesimo, and the Austrians near Aqua with fortifications in front of Montgo and Genoa. While Napoleon had centered his army around Savona separately, Napoleon outnumbered both of them. But if they were allowed to link up, he would be vastly outnumbered, which he desperately needed to prevent. Napoleon had to come up with a strategy that relied on deception and quick maneuver to keep the 2 armies separate and in the dark. He knew that the Austrians counted on the French advance towards Genoa, and Napoleon ordered fake attacks in that direction, drawing the Allied attention eastward. Meanwhile, however, he massed the bulk of his forces to the west. He knew that by taking over the mountain pass around the Allied armies would not be able to support each other. And on the 11th of April, 1796, he struck against the Austrian forces in the Battle of Montagnier. Victorious, and with the garrison routed, he rapidly continued the advance in 2 main assaults, and took Millesimo by the 14th and by the 15th of April. And by now, it was clear to everyone that Napoleon's goal was not to take over Genoa, but to split the Allied armies in 2 and take them on one by one. By the 16th of April, the Austrians had regrouped at Aqua. But because they were now completely oppositioned by Napoleon, they would soon decide to retreat to Alessandria and no longer offer any support to the Piedmont. The Piedmont, on the other hand, tried to prepare a hasty defense across the Gallia River, but Napoleon wouldn't give them any time to form a proper stronghold. And before the Piedmont could even cross the river, Napoleon's army had caught up with them on all sides. The flank by Napoleon was so swift and decisive that even the highly competent and respected Piedmont's General Toy Singh was caught completely off guard and killed in the chaos. And by the 21st of April, the Piedmont's army was effectively destroyed. This sequence of operations, dividing his enemies, striking rapidly and decisively, and using deception to mask his true intentions, became the hallmarks of Napoleon's art of war. And the successful Montagnier campaign earned him enormous respect from both his troops and his enemies. Roughly 10 years later, in the autumn of 1805, Europe was once again finding itself at war, and Napoleon was stronger than ever before. The Third Coalition, an alliance between Austria, Russia, and Britain, had just been formed. They had but one goal in mind: to topple Napoleon's newly declared empire. Austria, eager to strike before the Russian reinforcements arrived, advanced its army under General Karl Marx into Bavaria, hoping to threaten France's allies and disrupt Napoleon's strategic position. But Napoleon was aware of the coalition's plans and quickly gathered the Grand Army, his best trained and most cohesive force at Boulogne. Initially assembled for an invasion of England, the Grand Army now pivoted eastward towards Ulm with remarkable agility. Mack believed that he had time to fortify his position in M and await Russian support from the east. But what he failed to anticipate was the raw speed and the remarkable coordination of the French forces. And rather than attacking directly from the west, Napoleon executed a massive right-wheel maneuver, swinging his armies north and east of Mack's position, effectively surrounding the Austrian army without the battle. And before Mack could even process the danger that he was in, the French forces started to cross the Danube behind him. But the crossings would take days, and Napoleon had to find a way to keep the Austrians occupied to conceal it. To achieve this, Napoleon ordered heavy cavalry attacks from the west, which gave the impression that a massive frontal assault was near. And while the cavalry continued to conceal Napoleon's true intentions, Napoleon issued orders to secure every possible road leading out of Ulm, ensuring that Mack's army could neither withdraw nor receive reinforcements. And after all the critical roads have been captured, Napoleon ordered an attack on the vital fortification of Elchingen, winning a decisive battle that completely sealed the encirclement from the north. And now it was clear to Mack that a frontal attack would never come. Instead, he realized that Napoleon had now managed to wedge his entire Grand Army up behind him on a far superior position. Mack gave a desperate attempt to break out, but was crushed by French fortifications. With his supplies dwindling and morale dropping, Mack retreated back into Ems fortifications, desperately hoping for a Russian counterattack. But the Russians were 160 mirrors away with all lines of communication severed. His fate was sealed. And on October 17th, Napoleon sent an emissary demanding surrender.
Mack recognized the futile situation that he found himself in and surrendered along with 30,000 of his best men and equipment. Despite the fact that Mack was an otherwise prestigious and respected general, he was nothing but ridiculed by Napoleon when they met after his surrender. Napoleon is even said to have commented afterward, saying that Mack had the look of a man who had seen the world collapse on him. After the surrender of Mack's Austrian army at Ulm, Napoleon now turned east to pursue the Russian army under General Kutuzov. On the November 12, 1805, Napoleon marched into Vienna unopposed, but with winter approaching and his army deep in enemy territory, Napoleon was in need of a quick and decisive battle to end the campaign once and for all, and that opportunity came near the Moravian town of Austerlitz. The Allied army was confident in their numerical superiority, but what they didn't know is that Napoleon had personally scouted the terrain days earlier, where he had crafted such a brilliant plan that would be talked about for centuries to come. The day of the battle was also a dark and misty day with heavy fog blanketing the hills and valleys, making it easy for an overconfident commander like the 27-year-old Tsar Alexander of Russia to make unforgiving mistakes. Napoleon's right flank and the Marshal Davout was left undermanned, and he even abandoned the strategically important Pratzen Heights in the center of the battlefield, effectively inviting the Allies to occupy them. But this was of course a part of his devious plan, and upon seizing the Pratzen Heights, the Allied plan was to swing their main force through the French right, push it back, and then encircle the rest of Napoleon's army. But this was of course exactly what Napoleon wanted them to do, because it would leave their center dangerously exposed to a full-scale attack, and much thanks to the thick mist of that day, the Allies were not completely aware of Napoleon's true dispositions either. However, they began their full attack anyway at around 7 o'clock a.m. with Austrians and Russians advancing towards the French right. But the experienced French troops fortified at Hellnitz and Suchalnitz held out stubbornly, and things got even more complicated for the Allies when the Vaux's 3rd Corps arrived to reinforce them and ultimately halt what the Allies thought would be an easy breakthrough. And while the fighting bogged down at Solnitz and with the enemy center now weakened, Napoleon activated his trap. French troops surged out of the mist and up the heights.
The fighting quickly became fierce and chaotic, often descending into brutal hand-to-hand combat. But by the sheer numerical superiority, the French had secured the heights already by 11:00 a.m., effectively splitting the Allied army in two. Meanwhile, the French forces in the north successfully pushed back the Allies, which allowed Napoleon to use his central forces to crush the bulk of the Allied army that was still locked in heavy fighting at Solnitz. Now trapped between the French divisions and a series of frozen lakes, many Allied troops gave a desperate attempt to flee across the ice. But French artillery from the Pratzen Heights opened fire, and according to Napoleon's bulletins, the ice shattered and thousands drowned, which was likely exaggerated for propaganda effects, but very symbolic of the crushing nature of the defeat nonetheless. After the battle, the Austrians quickly sued for peace, signing the Treaty of Pressburg. Russia, on the other hand, withdrew from the conflict entirely, and the Third Coalition collapsed. Napoleon was now regarded as the most feared and respected general in modern military history. Thank you for watching. What is your favorite tactical move by Napoleon? And which commander should I cover next? And if you enjoy the content, why not subscribe? See you again soon.